meeting comes to order.
Madam Chair.
Our first order of business will be to do our minutes.
Madam Chair, I would like to move that we approve the minutes from the March 13th meeting.
Are there any corrections? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Okay, so with that, I'd like to welcome our distinguished chair today, who will be walking us through the bill and giving us a little preview of what's going to be happening over the next day and a half. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And before I move the bill, I wanted to just make one announcement as the chair, that I'm going to walk through the bill and for the first few minutes here today. And then I apologize to the committee. I like many of you, I have another bill in another committee. But I will come back as soon as I can to hear the public testimony, and particularly the public testimony of opponents. We've heard a lot from proponents of this bill. I'm especially interested in hearing from people who have concerns about the bill, and so we're going to hear them. We're going to hear supporters first and then opponents. And then I wanted to let the committee know as well, and I've talked with Representative Beard, the minority lead, and he's okay with this plan, which is that I'll present the bill rather than the usual back and forth with the author. We want to get the public in as quickly as possible, especially people that have traveled, and get their testimony on the record. Do as much of that as we possibly can today. We'll reconvene, as has been published tonight, to take additional public testimony, but we'll do the markup, we'll do the amendments and the voting on the bill tomorrow so that everybody can be here. We've counted at least 7 members that have other committee meetings tonight, as well as a couple of others that have other commitments. So we certainly don't want to be voting on this bill and discussing amendments with a skeletal crew on hand here. So to guarantee that we'll have everybody here for that very important part of the hearing, we'll extend into tomorrow, and I'm sure that we'll be able to get our amendments done and vote in our allotted committee time tomorrow. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to move House File 2395 for referral to the Tax Committee.
Proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So just a couple of comments I want to make before I present the bill. First of all, thanking our incredible staff, Mr. Burris and Mr. Lee, for the work that they've put in to preparing this bill, and, of course, our great researchers for both the Republican caucus and the Democratic caucus, Mr. Nicely and Ms. Nelson. Thank you for your work as well. This is a big bill. It's complicated, and a lot of work goes into it, so I want to thank the staff for their hard work. We have heard a lot over these last couple of years about the needs of the state of Minnesota in terms of transportation, our roads, bridges, and transit infrastructure. We've had many members of this committee and many members of the legislature come to this committee with specific projects in mind, whether it's Highway 14 or I-94 or Highway 23, Highway 70. I think everyone on this committee can start to recite these projects in their sleep. Projects like the Gateway Transit Corridor or Cedar BRT, Bottineau Light Rail. All of these have had hearings before this committee. And all of these projects are, as well as our basic maintenance of our infrastructure, our pavement, our roads, are in great need of funding and upkeep and maintenance. And what we've heard, though, is that we don't have the money to do these projects. Members, this is your opportunity to move the state in the direction of funding these projects and maintaining them over the long term. This is our opportunity collectively as a body to say, yes, we believe that all of these projects that people have come to this committee for are important, they're vital, they're urgent, and we have the mechanism to fund them now and into the long term. So that's the purpose of this bill, to be able to move forward on the myriad projects as well as maintaining our basic infrastructure that we have heard so much about over this last couple of years in this committee. So what I'd like to do, Madam Chair and members, is just quickly go over the basic outline and principles of this bill, and then we'll get into the public discussion. And again, I would urge members that have specific questions of me, we can hold off on those after the public testimony so we can give the public the opportunity to testify. So we start off knowing that half of our pavement is over 50 years old. It's at the end of its design life. Our current per gallon tax on motor fuels continues to decline as vehicles become more fuel efficient. Our funding cannot keep up with current and future needs. This bill seeks to address those shortfalls. Article 1 authorizes trunk highway bond proceeds for the Corridors of Commerce program, and I was very pleased with our bipartisan support of that effort that we started last year in this committee. We have $200 million, $50 million per year for 4 years in trunk highway bond proceeds. Also for the TED program, which has been something that Representative Mahoney has championed so well and effectively over the last couple of years. Now, one of the key features of this bill is Article 2. That imposes a 5% gross receipts tax at the first sale, point of sale, the wholesale level, as is the case that we currently do with the gas tax. So the Department of Revenue will determine the applicable gross receipts for motor fuels tax rate, which will be greater of either 10 cents per gallon or 5% of the annual Minnesota total wholesale gas price by refiners for the previous fiscal year. And members, here's what is critical to understand about this provision. Our current gas tax does not keep up with inflation. It's actually declining in value. So we need to find a new mechanism, as they've done in Virginia and Maryland and other states, that actually keeps up with inflation and that will continue to increase our net revenues for transportation rather than the declining gas tax proceeds that we get. So this is a new and important feature of this legislation. And again, we are cognizant of the fact that other states, including Virginia, on a bipartisan basis, the Republican legislature, House of Representatives in Virginia, led by the Republican Speaker, imposed a gross receipts tax. They recognize that's the future for transportation funding. Maryland then followed quickly. Other states are doing this. This is what we need to do in order to keep up with our needs. The gas tax will simply not keep up with our needs. And that's why we are doing the gross receipts tax. Article 3 expands the definition of the metropolitan area for the purposes of a transit tax to include all 7 counties. As you will recall, when we passed the transportation bill in 2008, the County's Transit Improvement Board was created. There were 5 counties in that board. Scott and Carver opted out of that. This actually now makes our 7-county system whole, and we include Scott and Carver in that arrangement. And so we have a local sales tax of 1% minus the rate imposed by the county, the local option tax that was enacted in 2008. So we'll have a uniform penny tax for transit throughout the region. So, there's a lot of different provisions then about this. I don't want to go into all the details. People that are familiar with the 2008 legislation understand we have a whole structure with the county's Transit Improvement Board. There's a GEARS committee that includes cities. We give some additional guidelines for how that money is used. We identify some transit corridors that are in the Met Council plan, including in the West and East Metro area. Article 4 addresses the CASA distribution, the distribution of leased vehicle sales tax proceeds. That's $32 million that currently goes to the general fund, and we have a distribution formula for that. for Greater Minnesota Transit and counties. There will be amendments related to this, so I don't want people to get too excited about the 70-30 split. There will be some amendments. So actually some amendments related to some of these previous sections as well. I think Representative Earhart has one that actually lowers the rate of taxation for the gross receipts tax, and we have some other ones. So we'll be talking about those tomorrow. Article 5 talks about the right-of-way loan acquisition fund known as RALPH, and we have some authority changes in terms of that. Article 6 requires MnDOT in each fiscal year to spend the total amount in federal transportation funds in a competitive grant program in Greater Minnesota, the total $16 million, in excess of the average annual spending on Greater Minnesota transportation alternatives. This is some ideas that Representative Bernardi has put forward, and so they're now in Article 1. So or Article 6, I'm sorry. So that's the bill. I think the two most important provisions are the gross receipts tax and the changes that we make to the metro sales tax. And again, there's some other kinds of more minor issues, but that's the gist of the bill. And with that, Madam Chair, I don't know. I know people probably are anxious to ask questions, but maybe if we want to do one or two, we could. But I think it's important to get to the public testimony.
Right.
So.
Well, it looks like our members are ready for the public testimony as well, so we can...
Okay, and I my sincere apologies. I hope to be back soon, and I especially hope to be back to hear from the opponents of the bill, and I want to thank all the supporters for coming out in such large numbers as you have for our previous two hearings. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. What we'll do is we're going to divide up the time so we can do it so everyone has the opportunity to provide the same amount of testimony. And we might be able to allow people 3 to 4 minutes is the way our guru for our finance person over here has calculated for us. And what we'll do is we'll get the person on deck so that they'll be ready to move in and to be able to provide the testimony. So with that, we'll start with Jason George and Patrick Baker. And Jason will begin with our public testimony. Okay, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Jason George. I'm Legislative and Political Director with the Operating Engineers Local 49. We represent 13,000 members, most of whom work in the transportation industry, building the roads and bridges and transit systems of this state. Normally, I'd prepare some nice testimony for you, but I'm just going to cover a few points here off the cuff and speak sort of from the heart a little bit. In general about the situation that we're facing in transportation, not in specifics on the bill. There'll be plenty of people behind me, smarter than me, that can talk about the specifics of the bill, believe me. So the first point I want to make quickly is that we have a funding crisis in transportation. I think everybody knows that. In particular, on the federal level, in September, the government runs out of money. They run out of money for the Highway Trust Fund. It starts a deficit starting in September. And quite frankly, to the people that make their living and earn a paycheck in this industry and their families, they're terrified of that. And the contractors that employ them are too. So we have an urgent need to do something right now. If we do nothing here in Minnesota and the Congress doesn't act, we're looking at a couple $100 million shortfall starting in 2015 for our transportation program. That means real projects gone. That means real families without jobs. So I guess my main point on the funding crisis is, with what's going on in Washington these days with Congress, I don't think we can afford in Minnesota to gamble on a do-nothing Congress and expect them to get their work done in September. I don't know anybody that has any broad hopes for that. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. That's how we feel. Second point, other states. This is a difficult issue. When you're talking about taxing, raising revenue, all the complicated formulas, different interest groups, this is a very complex thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. But you should know that, as the chairman Hornstein mentioned, 8 other states have acted. Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, Wyoming, Arkansas, Texas, and Missouri is pretty close. Those are all states that have rolled up their sleeves, got the hard politics done, and passed infrastructure spending, increased taxes a little bit, decreased some taxes too in some cases, and got some new money, whether it be from new revenue, combination of everything, for transportation infrastructure. I don't see any reason why Minnesota can't do the same. Third point, middle-class jobs. That's all I hear about at the Capitol these days, and our members are hearing about is middle-class jobs. Everybody's for middle-class jobs. Everybody's for, doing things to get folks from low-wage jobs to the middle-class jobs, which we support 100%. There is no bigger bill, no bigger thing that you could do in this year to create middle-class jobs than to pass a transportation infrastructure bill. $1 billion worth of spending on transportation infrastructure equals about 30,000 jobs. Not one of those jobs is a low-paying job. They're all middle-class jobs. So, I mean, we hear this talk, our members hear this talk, and they're ready for you guys to act. And it's right in front of you right now. The last point, as you can tell probably from my tone of voice, that people are frustrated. I hear from members every day. I'll just tell you, on the bus back from our lobby day, which was last week, we had a couple hundred members here that met with a lot of you sitting around this table right now. And on the bus, the conversation was, they're asking me, Jason, not one of our legislators disagreed that we need to do something on transportation. They're all for it. But they all told us we can't do anything about it. Why? They don't understand that. And quite frankly, I don't understand that. So I wanted to make those 4 points to you and set up for what you're going to hear about with the details of the bill, which are, again, smarter people than me are going to give you all kinds of lovely points about the details of the bill. But those are things that real people are feeling right now. I know that we have members here today, there's laborers here today, Teamsters here today, I see. Everybody that works in the transportation construction industry is frustrated. So I encourage you, I implore you for them to do something this year to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Mr. Baker, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Patrick Baker, and I am the Director of Government and Institutional Affairs for Greater Mankato Growth, the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organization serving over 800 members in the Greater Mankato area. And in fact, I've brought about 45 of my close community members here with me today, so I'm happy to have them here. And I'm honored to be here and look forward to sharing with you why investing in transportation infrastructure is crucial for the economic vitality of our region. But before I forget, please allow me to thank Representative Johnson for his tremendous leadership on behalf of our community, and particularly on this issue. And please allow me to thank this entire committee for your efforts last year to pass Corridors of Commerce funding. As you know, we're making good use of those dollars by continuing to make progress on completing Highway 14. We like the program so much, in fact, that Greater Mankato Growth will be sending you all a letter later this week encouraging you to pass additional Corridors of Commerce funding this legislative session. But today I'm going to talk about the importance of transportation and support the importance of transportation to support continued growth of our economy, and share with you the results of a survey that Greater Mankato Growth did of our members. So as you may have heard, Greater Mankato's economy is experiencing tremendous growth. I want to highlight for you just a few examples that are emblematic of that growth and vitality happening in Greater Mankato. The Greater Mankato region received its designation as a metropolitan statistical area in 2008 and currently has a population of over 98,000, up 14% since 2000. We are number 43 in the nation and top in the state for the fastest growing gross domestic product. We have the fastest job growth in the state, and Forbes magazine predicts that we will have the highest long-term job growth of all MSAs in the state, or all MSAs in the country, of less than 250,000. We are a level 1 regional trade center with retail spending per capita double all other Minnesota metros, suggesting that large volumes of traffic coming in and out of our community every day for their shopping. And our region's agricultural heart continues to pump with the largest agricultural income of all greater Minnesota MSAs and livestock income that is higher than Omaha, Nebraska. and we aren't slowing down anytime soon. Greater Mankato is poised to have its most successful year on record in 2014. Particularly, as you're aware, Walmart and FedEx will be constructing major distribution facilities in Mankato this year, adding to the already high commercial vehicle levels on Highway 14 and other highways throughout southern Minnesota and our entire state. So the key thread in all of this is that we need the need for our community to efficiently and safely move goods and individuals out of and into our market and across our entire region has never been more important. Yet as southern Minnesota's economy is thriving and growing, our infrastructure is not keeping up. But our members recognize that the investments we need in infrastructure will cost money. In fact, a survey Greater Mankato Growth conducted of our members on transportation, 72%, and these are majority business members of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that the state needs additional revenue to keep our transportation safe, effective, and properly maintained. And when we asked them about what that future transportation revenue source ought to be, 49% agreed or strongly agreed that when asked if the state should transition away from the gas tax in favor of another revenue source, well, 29% disagree with that. So, in conclusion, as southern Minnesota and our region continues to grow and become an even bigger contributor to the state's economy, we expect our partners, our public partners, to do their share by making the necessary investments to provide a safe and efficient transportation infrastructure that supports the region's businesses and commuters. The longer these critical investments are put off, the more lives will be lost, the more expensive these projects will become, and the more regional economic growth that will be foregone. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Well, we had two very good examples for keeping testimony very concise and helpful. Thank you very much. Commissioner Carter, you're up now, and then on deck is Kent Solom.
Thank you very much to the chair and members. I just want to appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak in favor of passage of HF 2395. I am from Ramsey County on the Board of Commissioners there, and also this year's president of the Minnesota Association of Counties. I want to share with you that at the association, as we traveled around the state this year, the most consistent mention from counties is the need for revenue for transportation. In fact, 80 of our counties have passed resolutions in support of more transportation funding over the past 2 years. So, a high priority for the Association of Minnesota Counties is legislation to pass a comprehensive multimodal transportation finance package. Transportation infrastructure all over the state is in disrepair and is in dire need of maintenance and reconstruction and new options to fit the changing lifestyles and demographics of Minnesotans all across the state. And the needs have been well documented through the Governor's Transportation Finance Advisory Committee, on which I served. County boards all over the state have taken tough votes themselves to increase taxes on their constituents and to provide for our local roads through the wheelage tax and through the local option sales tax authority. We're calling on you now as state legislators to also make the same commitment through passage of this bill. The bill has something for everyone in all regions, and as well as important efficiency and transparency measures. The Association of Minnesota County staff, commissioners, and county engineers worked this past summer and fall and agreed that something encompassed in this bill, which is a reform to the county's state aid highway formula, will help to simplify the distribution and provide greater clarity in distribution as combined with significant new funding. Additionally, the gross tax receipts concept within the bill is an important step toward a more sustainable and a more efficient transportation funding. Our per-gallon formula simply isn't keeping up with construction inflation, and due to changes in our marketplace and more fuel-efficient vehicles. The gross receipts tax will provide predictability and sustainability, and it will allow us to more effectively keep pace with increases in materials prices. The bill has much-needed increases in funding also for congestion mitigation and for transit expansion in the metro area. And this will help to keep our region competitive and attract business and talent to our area. The bike and pedestrian connection funding will enhance our transportation options and safety as well across the state. And the funding for the Corridors of Commerce program, of course, will address critical state routes that have been waiting for improvements for many years. I encourage you to please support this bill this year so that we can get to work and make certain that our state is competitive and that our transportation and transit needs are met, even as other states also move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. And if you could just say your name and the hat you are wearing today for the record, that would be wonderful.
I am Commissioner Tony Carter, and the hat I am wearing is for the Association of Minnesota Counties as its president.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your testimony. Kent Sulam, and I see Margaret Donna, who knows the... Oh, we're going together? Yeah, I kind of know the program here. Thank you very much. And then on deck is Amanda Dewar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Margaret Donahoe. I'm the Director of the Minnesota Transportation Alliance.
Welcome to the committee. You may proceed.
Thank you. I want to really express our strong support for House File 2395. We appreciate the fact that this is a comprehensive bill that provides additional revenue for highways, transit, bike and pedestrian facilities, and that it's statewide. We think that this is critical. You've heard a lot about the needs, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but clearly we have huge and growing needs on all of our transportation system. And unless something is done to change the funding sources that we have, we will continue to fall farther and farther behind. And I think, as you can tell from driving around the roads this spring, the public is very much aware of the deterioration of our roads and the problems that we have with potholes, and the cost to drivers is very real when they have to pay hundreds of dollars to have their cars fixed. It's a very real cost when the state is not taking care of this important public asset. So we appreciate this bill. I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes focusing a little bit more on the gross receipts tax on fuel. And you should have a handout that has an Alliance logo on it. Because there has been a lot of confusion and sometimes some inaccuracies about how this would work. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, again, about how the current fuel tax is collected. I think as Chairman Hornstein mentioned, the current fuel tax is collected currently and remitted to the Department of Revenue by about 423 fuel distributors. That is the point of collection today. The distributors obviously pass that cost on to the gas stations pass that cost on to the consumers at the pump. But from the state's perspective, where the state collects the tax is from the distributors. And this bill does not change that. There's no change in this bill in the point of collection, in who pays the tax, how the tax is collected, what the exemptions are. None of that changes. Basically, how this works is it would be an adjustment on an annual basis calculated by the Department of Revenue to the per gallon tax. So it becomes sort of a blended number that includes the existing excise tax along with the calculated amount from the gross receipts tax, which would be converted into a cents per gallon equivalent. So that makes it very simple, very cost-effective administratively to collect this tax. But the benefit, of course, is that it's a tax based on the price of fuel. So as the price increases, the revenue will increase and will keep up with inflation, whereas simply increasing the current per gallon tax is kind of like spinning your wheels, because not only will the real dollar value of that increase decrease in the future, but when you compare that with construction inflation, the purchasing power will also decrease in the future. So that's why other states and even the federal government is looking at this option, basically a sales tax on fuel, as a way to get around the inherent problem that we have with a per gallon tax that relies on consumption of fuel, which will go down in the future. So I wanted to clarify that. There's been a lot of confusion. Because this doesn't change the point of collection, this is no more or less hidden than the current fuel tax. It's also the way it's drafted as a gross receipts tax, which is a tax on the business of selling fuel. It fits the language in Minnesota's Constitution that requires that that revenue be deposited in the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. So this money would be constitutionally dedicated. It would have to be used for a highway purpose, according to the Constitution. That's another important thing for our members. And again, I think the important thing is that this is a way to make this revenue source much more sustainable into the future. That's why we think that this is a really important piece of this bill. And again, you're going to hear about the cost of this. We have, of course, huge needs, and this will not address all of the highway needs. We think that this will put a significant dent in meeting the highway needs that are out there. But the cost to the consumer, the cost to the average driver, is really not that significant. When you look at the average number of miles driven and the average fuel efficiency of cars, the average driver, this would cost them about the equivalent of a cup of coffee per week. On an annual basis, it's much less than the cost of a front-end alignment. So this is not a huge burden, we don't think. And again, the more you drive, the more you pay. So this is something we think the public supports as a user fee, and will be very supportive when they will see the benefits, the projects that get done, because we're able to get this increase in revenue.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Kent Sulam with the Minnesota Association of Townships.
And yes, thank you for introducing yourself. If you can just hold on a second, we do have a question from Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as we continue this conversation, for Ms. Donahoe, there are two things I would like to ask you to comment on, Ms. Donahoe. I've been around here a while. I've heard you speak in many settings and venues. And as we're talking about a stable and sustainable source of funding, I'm having a flashback to the motor vehicle sales tax for transit. When we talked about stable and sustainable sources of funding, one of the hues and cry that I've heard when I first got here and for many years afterwards was, if we could just dedicate the motor vehicle sales tax, which I agree was necessary and needed to happen, that was a political promise that was started back in the 1970s that we finally fulfilled, and thank you for your help on that. But part of the rationale for selling that was that it would be the sustainable and predictable source going forward in the future that would help fund transit needs. No sooner did we pass it than we hit the Great Recession and revenues tanked. And so here we are with the sales tax and motor vehicle sales tax, motor vehicles now, not meeting the need. All of a sudden it's not stable, it's not sustainable. And so now we're still looking for that magic whatever to fix the need that we have. So now we're talking about the gross receipts tax, which is a percentage of the price of gasoline at the wholesale level. Help me not have deja vu, or tell me why I shouldn't have this again. Because at the moment, gas in my neighborhood is up to $3.69. I have no idea why. But I do know that the price of a barrel of crude has stayed pretty steady and in some cases falling. And what happens to us when gas falls back down to, $2.95 a gallon or something to that effect? I want to just talk about this because I've been there, heard this, and I'm seeing it again. But
Ms. Donahoe?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Beard. Yes, we always struggle, it seems, with not really meeting the needs. And we try to make that very clear that whatever legislation gets passed, whether it was the dedication of the motor vehicle sales tax or the bill in 2008, that it will not meet all of the needs that are out there. The reason that we have this structured, or we would like to see this structured as a combination of the per gallon tax and the gross receipts tax, is to deal with some of that volatility. We know there is more volatility in the price of fuel, but at the same time, if you look historically at the last 20, 30 years at fuel prices, it's pretty clear that the trend has been, overall, has been upward. So in looking at that, and again, looking at forecasts for consumption, which are going down, this seems like a way to try and provide more stability without being totally reliant on the percentage of the price of fuel. But again, trying to find some way of adjusting this so it does a better job of keeping up with inflation.
Representative Beard.
Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you for doing a little explaining on that. And I know there's others that are going to testify about the gross receipts tax. One of the things that would be helpful to the committee from either your organization or others would be some sort of a rough pro forma on what it would look like if the price of gas went to $4 or dropped to $3.10. What would that mean in swings in the fund, so we kind of know what we're setting ourselves up for? The second part of my question is a political question, Madam Chair. Ms. Donahoe, you know, we have the Move Minnesota group is the folks that I've seen and heard here for a few years, and you're doing a masterful job of talking to us here. However, the public is the one that sends us here. And, oh, by the way, did anybody notice this is an election year? And everybody in this around this table is up for re-election, or these positions are all up for re-elections, maybe more an accurate way to say it, Ms. Donahoe. But and I'm not saying this to be scornful or to chide anyone, but one party controls the entire legislative process here. You could get this done if that's all there was to consider it. But having chaired this committee when the Senate and the House were both in the party I sit in that control, I can tell you how difficult it is politically to reach a consensus, even when you've got everybody on your side heading the same way. The political pressures from our districts and from others really don't emanate from the people sitting in this room, who all have a vested interest in a $700 million tax increase. I get that. But suppose we would pass this bill. What is your organization going to do to provide cover when we go back home and say, please vote for us again because we just raised your taxes $700 million. Oh, by the way, we're going to build more trains in Hennepin County, and we might get around to building your bridge on Highway 14, too. Is there a plan for that, for the political side of this equation?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Donahoe.
Thank you, Representative Beard. I think that the results of the bill that passed in 2008 are something that we have spent a lot of time trying to highlight as much as we can with the public. There was a gas tax increase passed in 2008 in an election year, and because of that, we've seen major projects done that would not have been done. Bridges, like the Hastings Bridge and a number of other bridges getting done. I think the benefit in transportation is that we can show the public exactly what they get for their tax dollars in transportation, and we can show them projects that won't get done for 20 years unless the legislature does something to increase funding. So I think that if the legislature, and we certainly hope that you do, support this, we will have projects that we will be able to show the public. Guess what? This piece of 14 is getting done because your legislator voted for the funding to make that happen. And we think that that's very powerful for people running for re-election.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're probably asking you because you've been the person as part of this for the most amount of time. But anyone else coming up could answer the questions I have as well. As you and others sat around a table to put this particular package together, I mean, in the case of infrastructure and particularly in the case of transportation, equity, fairness is always probably second to condition of infrastructure the biggest issue. You will see that as amendments come forward, many of them come out of a feeling that one person or another or one region or another thinks there's something unfair. How did that guide the coalition's discussions, and particularly on the issue of did we tax fairly, does the bill tax fairly, and does the bill assure spending fairly? Does everybody pay, and is there some assurance that everyone receives the benefit? How did that guide the thinking of this particular package? And I would invite anyone testifying today to talk about that.
Ms. Donahoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would say two things. First of all, as someone who's the head of a statewide coalition of very diverse interests, that's something we deal with all the time. And it is a balancing act to make sure that some benefits are accruing to every part of the state, to all parts of the system. And it is a challenge in transportation because you're dealing with a system that's interconnected. Some parts of that system have greater needs than other parts of the system, just in terms of the physical condition of them, and sometimes that doesn't fit neat geographic or political boundaries. But we have to focus on the transportation system and what the transportation system needs foremost. And I think a lot of our members understand that. Sometimes you have to sort of wait your turn for your project or your part of the state because there are higher needs in other parts of the system. I think we always try to be sensitive to how much different areas are paying and how the distribution works. The distribution formulas we spend a lot of time on. But again, it is a system, and everyone benefits from that system to some extent. Whether you're in the cities and you're getting products from outstate, shipped here, or vice versa, everybody benefits from the fact that there is a system. So we, in putting this together, tried to look at where the biggest needs are. That's why we focused on the Corridors of Commerce program and the TED program and the transit plan in the metro area. Frankly, we also kind of looked at what the legislature has considered in recent years, and what the legislature considered last session as kind of a starting point for what's politically feasible in putting together a funding bill. I'm sure we could come up with other revenue sources and other ideas and other ways of doing this, but we wanted it to be somewhat grounded in what it seemed like the legislature was willing to consider. And, we appreciate the fact that the chair has been willing to listen to us and consult us. This is really, at the end of the day, Representative Hornstein's bill. And we respect that, and we want to work with everybody on the committee as much as we can. But we don't have I guess I don't have a great answer for that, other than we are trying to make progress in a way that we think we can get past.
Okay, and we have a follow-up by Representative Hausman, and then one more by a question by Representative Holberg, and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And specifically to the issue, does everyone pay? And I'm going to zero in specifically on the issue of supporting transit. Does everyone pay?
Ms. Donahoe.
Madam Chair, I guess, does everyone pay? In terms of the increase revenue in the bill is basically, for Metro Transit, is from the metropolitan area sales tax. I don't know if that's the question that you have. I guess we also look at, the other revenue sources for transit, general fund, motor vehicle sales tax, lots of different revenue sources. But in the bill, that is the increase in the funding for transit in the metropolitan area. For Greater Minnesota, it's a portion of the leased vehicle revenue. But
Representative Hausman, did you have a follow-up?
Later.
Okay, thank you. Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your fairness discussions, did you have any discussion around the alternative fuels? We see, in particular, large delivery companies, garbage haulers using natural gas or propane, increased use of electric cars, et cetera. When we asked this question of the Commissioner of Transportation earlier, his response is that those cars cost more, and in the sales tax and tabs they pay more. Well, with that rationale, you would look at exempting gas tax for luxury cars. It didn't really hold a lot of weight, at least with me. So can you talk to the committee a little bit about this fairness, and that they are definitely users of the road system but are not participating because they're not using gas?
Ms. Donahoe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Holberg, that is an issue that has come up. It wasn't really much something that the Move Minnesota group discussed. From the Alliance perspective, we have suggested that there be a flat annual fee for all electric cars, because all electric cars and propane, I think, are the fuels that aren't taxed under the fuel tax. But under this proposal, other fuels, compressed natural gas, liquefied gas, biodiesel, E85, all the other alternative fuels that we have, those taxes would be proportionately increased under this proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, it's very good. Thank you for your patience there, Mr. Sulam.
No problem. I'm just happy to have a good partner.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Again, Madam Chair, Ken Sulam with the Minnesota Association of Townships. And Representative Beard, I hope you can stick for just a couple of minutes, because actually your questions changed my testimony, or how I want to present it, because the question gets asked us all the time, what are the people saying? What are the people saying? I accept the fact that I'm not a person anymore, government lawyer who lobbies. I can accept that, that's fine. That's my job. But I represent 9,000 town officers who are real people. I represent 9,000 town officers who I think most of you acknowledge are as close to their citizens as they can possibly be. And they're the ones telling me, pass this bill, pass it now. The people are speaking. This room is full of people besides just hired guns like myself. And I'm in-house. I'm a little different than just your average contract lobbyist. But they are speaking. But they're speaking through their spokespersons. They're speaking through us. They're speaking through their town officers. 529 townships have signed the resolution saying pass this bill this year. That's 200 more than I was able to give you 3 weeks ago at the joint conference. That's 200 more that have sent it in now that they know more about this bill and that we are making progress. Is it a perfect solution addressing every single thing? Well, as Ms. Donahoe said, no. We're not going to address 100% of everything that's out there. But if we don't pass this bill, we're going to do 100% of nothing. And that's a lot worse. And the people are watching. We can't do electioneering. We cannot campaign for you. But I can tell you, if you look at the 2008 bill and actually look at the election, how many lost their seat because the voters voted them out on the override. Some had issues within their internal party. That's a separate battle. I can't weigh in on that. But the people who had the courage to do that override and were on the ballot came back. The voters do pay attention. I can tell you they pay attention to the property tax. 75% property tax dependency at the township level right now. 10 years ago, we were at 50%. What's the number one driving factor in our budgets? Transportation, roads. 56,000 miles of roads. They get product off the farms. They get you to your cabins. They get people to the hunting lands. 56,000 miles of road that are not being rebuilt, and the efforts to try to even just maintain them is getting harder and harder because the revenues aren't there, except for property tax. 6,000 bridges on the township system, 421 of which are on the critical deficiency list. Now, as I've told you before, we took 60 off the list last year. We put 62 on. We're losing ground without funding for infrastructure. So that's why the people have supported their town officers, and the town officers have supported the association. They're passing these resolutions. We need this bill, and we need it now. Why are we in support of the gross receipts? Because that's the part that comes down to the little guys. We can highlight the big projects. I want to see the big Highway 14 corridors done and corridors of commerce. Absolutely, we support that. But it's this gas tax and the gas tax alternative through the gross receipts that reaches your backyards. It's the roads. That's the 5% set aside constitutionally dedicated for us. And that's why our members are saying, yes, we need this portion of the bill, and we need it now. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Representative Howe.
And I don't know if you guys are the, Madam Chair, I don't know if these folks are the right people to answer this question, but it looks to me like we've got a diesel equivalent gallon for propane and for compressed natural gas. When the question was asked about the electric car, why is there not a kilowatt equivalent to a gallon? Where is that? There's a lot of smart engineers out there. Where is that calculation? So those folks that are driving those hybrids or those electric cars are paying something into the share.
Do either of you feel comfortable answering that question, or?
Oh, Madam Chair, I can't answer the specific as to what kilowatt equivalency might be. I'm not an engineer. I don't know that. I can tell you that if there's additional sources of revenue that would help people make this bill fairer, that make sure everybody's paying in. My brothers are avid users of the transit because they can't drive. They bike everywhere. They'd be happy to pay a bike registration fee to the state to help pay in. That would actually add to this bill and help us go one step further towards more needs. We've told you we're not getting 100% of need here. We're making a very sustainable dent. If you've got ideas to help us make it even better, let's have it, and bring more revenues in to meet the bigger need, because the need isn't going away. It's only getting larger.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are going to move on to Ms. Dewar, and then on deck is Sherry Munyon and Dave Van Haddam. Did you see? Oh, what's his name?
All right.
Okay, welcome to the committee, Ms. Dewar. State your name for the record.
Yep, my name is Amanda Dewar, and I'm here representing the U.S. Highway 14 Partnership. I'm here to offer the partnership strong support for this funding proposal because it includes ongoing funding of the Corridors of Commerce program. Last session, the Highway 14 Partnership advocated for the creation and initial funding of the Corridors of Commerce program. The program's focus on building capacity and addressing missing links in our corridor system presented an opportunity to finally make progress on long overdue highway expansion projects like Highway 14. Applications for over 120 eligible projects throughout the state were submitted to MnDOT for this initial round of Corridors of Commerce funding of $300 million, of which 10 were selected. And because of the Corridors of Commerce program, meaningful progress is going to be made on Highway 14 in the next few years. However, even after that work is done, there will still be segments in need of expansion to provide a consistent 4-lane corridor from Rochester to New Ulm. So you will continue to see our organization in front of this committee until Highway 14 is complete. Southern Minnesota's economy is strong, but we need the infrastructure to support this growth. And as demonstrated by the project requests, there are hundreds of other needed highway improvements across the state. Highways 10, 23, 52, 61, 169, 212, 371, I-94, 494, to name just a few. MnDOT's made it clear that absent additional resources, these projects are going to go unfinished. I also want to quickly compliment the inclusion of an efficiency measure that's included in this bill. The Greater Minnesota Right-of-Way Acquisition Loan Fund could speed up the property acquisition needed for highway projects, improve project readiness for Corridors of Commerce funding. With right-of-way needed for additional expansion on Highway 14 and many other corridors across the state, this program could provide options for moving projects forward. So I urge this committee to pass this bill. The longer we wait to provide the transportation investment that we all know is needed, the more opportunities for economic growth that our state will miss. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dewar. I'm not sure if I see Ms. Munyon in the audience. She may be across the way, so we will come back to her if she's able to get here before we're done, and we'll go to Mr. Van Haddam. Thank you and welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record. Okay.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Dave Van Haddam. I'm with Transit for Livable Communities. On behalf of TLC and 10,000 members across the metro and many allied organizations, we strongly support House File 2395. I'm going to cover two things. First, what the metro area sales tax buys, and then why it's so important to make that investment, but all of the investment that's in this bill. So very quickly, you've heard this before, but the metro area sales tax would fund 3 additional light rail lines, 6 additional highway bus rapid transit, 12 additional rapid bus lines, a 4% growth in the regular bus system, as well as very critical bike and pedestrian connections, ADA compliance, safe routes to school, a number of things in that active transportation realm. So this bill provides critical funding to build out the metro area transit system. And by that, we mean both Metro Transit and suburban providers. By doing so, it will greatly enhance the Twin Cities' economic competitiveness, substantially increase access to opportunity, especially for those who need it most, and create a more energy efficient and sustainable transportation system. Greater MSP tells us that when corporate site selectors come to the Twin Cities, one of their first questions is to see our transit map. And by that, they mean what kind of rail network do we either have in place or will have soon. Right now, our map is woefully behind that of most peer regions. Dallas, Denver, and Salt Lake each has approximately twice the number of light rail and commuter rail miles either built or under construction as does the Twin Cities. Many other regions have or are well on their way to having a 21st century transit system. Denver, at least partly due to its transit vision and investment, is the #1 city that young people are choosing to move to. The recent Itasca Project Return on Investment study of the accelerated build-out of the Metro Transit system found $3 in direct economic benefits for every dollar invested. It's very important to note that the largest share of those benefits are reduced travel time for all commuters across the region, as well as reduced time for moving goods. So this is about economic competitiveness. It's also about expanding opportunity. With the transit build-out, 500,000 more people would be able to get to employers within a reasonable transit commute, under 30 minutes. 50,000 of those folks would be those living in the poorest 20% of the region. These expanded transit options allow people to economize on transportation costs and direct those savings to education, housing, health care, and other priorities. We know that a large share of people choose to use transit where it's conveniently available. For example, in downtown Minneapolis, over 40% commute by bus or train. A recent Met Council survey found that 3 times as many people want to use transit as currently do so. But the problem is that far too much of our region does not have a convenient transit option. In many suburbs, transit is almost exclusively a couple of commute routes in the morning and back to the 2 core cities. And in our core cities, far too often service hours don't extend fully enough into the weekends and evenings, and many critical connections are missing. So we need to build the transit ways that CTIB has so successfully advanced since 2008, but we also need to increase that basic bus service by 4%, as I mentioned. Finally, the 3/4-cent sales tax increase for metropolitan area transit that's in this bill brings the total to a full cent. Most of our peer regions also use a sales tax for transit expansion, and at a full cent, we would reach parity with many of these peers. Atlanta, Boston, Cleveland, Dallas, Denver, and Houston are all at a full cent to transit. We remain well behind Seattle, which is at 1.8 cents. We'd also remain considerably further behind the vast majority of our global competitors in both transit investment and ridership, transit ridership on a per capita basis. So to conclude, on behalf of TLC and Move Minnesota, we wholeheartedly support House File 2395. This bill will ensure that all Minnesotans can get where they need to go. Commuters, yes, but also shoppers, seniors, students, those looking for jobs, immigrants, people with disabilities, those with cars who want a choice, and those without cars would all be able to get where they need to go. Finally, the bill makes the smart and urgent investments in our transit and transportation system that will best enhance Minnesota's economic competitiveness and quality of life.
Thank you very much. We do have a question. Representative Mahoney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you mentioned that this would bring the 3 commuter lines or LRT lines. Do you know which ones those are?
I can, Madam Chair and Representative Mahoney, right now under the Metropolitan Council plan, the ones that are moving forward are Southwest, Bottineau, and then an East Metro line. It looks like the most likely place for that East Metro would be the Rush, some combination of the Rush line going north along 35E and West 7th out to the airport. The planning process takes some time to figure out exactly which line, but certainly one of those 3 is going to be an East Metro light rail.
And Madam Chair?
Yes, Representative Mahoney.
So then there would be, what is it? The green line, the blue line, and then 2 other lines, so there'd be 4 lines over in the Minneapolis, serving Minneapolis, 1 a combined St. Paul, Minneapolis line, and 1 line over in St. Paul.
Madam Chair, Representative.
You don't need to answer, that's just a
Mr. Van
comment.
Hatten. Oh, that's
Thank
it.
you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, Representative Beard.
Madam Chair, I just want you to know, I know people are a little tired of me kind of talking about that, but I want people to never forget that there seems to have been a strong build-out of the West Metro area versus the East Metro. And, you know, it gets a little tiring, just like people get tired of me.
Thank you, Representative Mahoney. Representative Beard.
Representative Mahoney, or Madam Chair, I will never tire of Representative Mahoney. He always makes me think about things and inspires follow-on comments, like the comment we had a little bit ago, the discussion with Ms. Donahoe about how difficult this is, and the fault lines aren't always R and D. Many times there's, even with metro area, we've got fault lines. And not that I'm complaining, but I could just point out that this bill, as it stands at the moment, will suck about $12 million a year out of Scott County. And for the next 10 years, there isn't one transit line drawn to Scott County. It all goes to CTIB to be dispensed other places. So even though we're kind of West Metro, we're kind of far out West Metro, and we have no train lines, we have no BRT on a map, we have nothing like that. But we're being asked to play. We're being asked to play in the pond, so that's why we're having this discussion. Just so you know that this is pretty mixed. You know, Madam Chair, as I see a hand being raised, we could have a transit line running through Scott County. I think it's called Dan Patch, but I'll just leave my comments there.
Okay. We have one more question before we go on, and Representative Earhart.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just saying, think how long we in Hennepin County have watched all the money sucked out of Hennepin County for the rest of the state before you worry about that paltry $12 million.
Mr. Van Hatten.
If I could respond, Madam Chair and Representative Beard, under the existing CTIB arrangement, Washington County, which didn't in the early years have a transitway, has a guarantee. I can't speak for CTIB, but I think once Scott and Carver are in this joint powers organization, there will be some spending in those counties. I would also feel pretty confident that a number of people will use the southwest green line from Scott County.
Thank you. Okay. The next person is Janelle Waldock, and Fred Corrigan is on deck, followed by, we'll be listening to Leslie Davis' testimony after that. So, okay. Welcome, Ms. Waldock.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Janelle Waldock, and I'm the director of the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. And I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Move Minnesota Coalition. So you might wonder why Blue Cross is part of a transportation coalition. Simply put, while incorporating physical activity and bike ped options as part of our state's transportation plan is not the total silver bullet for Minnesota's healthcare conundrum, it does need to be a part of the solution. Your colleagues in the Health and Human Services Committee, I'm sure, would echo our sense of urgency on the status of health in Minnesota, particularly the worrying research that estimates that the current generation will have a shorter lifespan than that of their parents. We see working with a diverse group of non-traditional stakeholders advocating for transportation funding not just as critical to job growth and economic competitiveness, but moreover, the overall health of all Minnesotans. At Blue Cross, our goal is to make the healthy choice the easy choice. But for our state, it's really a big challenge. In the last 10 years alone, obesity levels in Minnesota have jumped from 15% in 1995 to 26% in 2012. By 2020, projections suggest the figures will see nearly 1 in 3 Minnesotans classified as obese. The implications of this increase are even starker, as an obese population brings with it risks of substantial chronic health problems. The CDC reports risks of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and most cancers. In addition, problems in pregnancy and childbirth are all highest in this population. These problems will add a projected $3.7 billion to Minnesota's annual health care costs by 2020. But the costs do not stop in the healthcare arena. A 2011 Gallup poll estimates that overweight or obese full-time workers in the United States miss over 450 million more days of work each year than healthy workers, costing businesses $153 billion annually in lost productivity. As you can imagine, these are figures that both keep us awake at night, but also drive the work that we do at Blue Cross. The good news is that we already know many of the solutions to curbing this epidemic, and a big part of that is increased physical activity. Health experts at the CDC, the U.S. Surgeon General's office, and the World Health Organization all agree and recommend physical activity, including walking and biking, to help prevent chronic diseases and improve long-term health. They also recommend that communities and states pass local ordinances that create built environments to encourage that activity. Minnesotans also agree, with 87% of people, both in rural and urban areas, believing that the way a community is built has a big effect on how much physical activity they get. At Blue Cross, we are committed also to capital solutions, such as the Nice Ride Minnesota program that we're the signature sponsor of, that saw over 300,000 rentals in 2013, as well as providing economic vitality with businesses near the Nice Ride Minnesota stations that saw an estimated $150,000 increase in spending over the course of a season. We also support active transportation policy solutions, such as safe routes to school, that support improvements to the routes that children use to walk and bike to school, giving them the opportunity to get much-needed physical activity. We strongly support that Minnesota continue its commitment to comprehensive transportation funding by passing House File 2395, including long-term sustainable funding for bike and walk community connections. The funding amounts for those projects are comparatively small, but such a commitment will underscore our shared quest for healthy Minnesota communities now and in the future. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time today, and I stand ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Waldock.
Thank you.
Okay, Fred Corrigan. Is he here? Okay, we will move on to Leslie Davis. And then on deck will be Nancy Schuweiler, I believe, and then John Hausladen. Thank you very much. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Davis.
Morning, Madam Chair. I'm Leslie Davis. I woke up 4 o'clock this morning, and I said, this is going to be the day that you get it on the money plan. That I'm going to be able to put it together so that it comes through to you really bright and clear that this is the answer to any of our problems. But first, I'd like to thank Ms. Holberg and Ms. Hausman for responding back to my emails. A lot of times you send an email out, and it goes into a black hole. But I got excited today because my tickler alarm went off. I thought it was Bankers Day at the legislature today, so I got excited, and I had a banker's joke for you that I didn't want to waste about the kids in school, and the teacher asked them all to say what their mother does, and one kid says, my mom's a teacher, one's a homemaker, one's a dental hygienist, and one kid says, my mom's a stripper. She works in a bar and takes off her clothes, and men put money in her panties, and the bell rings, and the kids disappear.
David, I think it would be appropriate if you would just get onto your testimony about the bill. I would appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And she said, well, your mother doesn't that.
Excuse me, I'd like you to stop. I would like you to stop the joke that you're talking about and move on to your testimony. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll get back my train of thought. Let's go to my handout. You know, I try to deal with, I'm running for governor in the DFL, and I tried to communicate with Governor Dayton about this, but he communicated with the Tooth Fairy, and the Tooth Fairy doesn't support this, so obviously Mr. Dayton won't. So he doesn't know where money comes from or how it comes into circulation. But I do, and my colleagues do. And let me go over this a moment and tell you how it does. When a bank makes a loan, it simply adds to the borrower's deposit account in the bank by the amount of the loan. The money is not taken from anyone else's deposit. It wasn't previously paid to the bank by anyone. It's new money created by the bank for the use of the borrower. You understand that point? It's really significant that it doesn't come from the Tooth Fairy. It's not a printing press. It's just the bank creating it in their computer for the borrower. They don't go down to the vault and get it or anything like that. To go on here is Mr. Monk, Assistant General International Affairs with the U.S. Treasury, said, the actual creation of money always involves extension of credit by private commercial banks. So I get on to the next page, which is the powers of Minnesota state-chartered banks. Not Wells Fargo, U.S. banks, but the state-chartered banks that are licensed and supervised by the Minnesota Department of Commerce. There's hundreds of them throughout the state. And this is what that relates to. You control the rules under which the state-chartered banks operate. The next page points that to you, the Department of Commerce letter. They supervise and examine these state-chartered banks, and so does the FDIC. That's the only federal involvement in state-chartered banks is the FDIC, not the Federal Reserve, not the Treasury Department. So they supervise and oversee that. And now we get to the money plan.
And then,
The money plan requires that...
Excuse me, Mr. Davis, will this be related to this bill today?
Say again?
Will your statements be related to this bill today?
Yeah, because this money plan, what you do with the bill that you have is you dump the entire bill and you use this as a replacement amendment for all of it, and it solves all the problems. Taxes and roads and bridges and kind of like that. And I'm going to show you exactly how it does it.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Davis. You've had 4 minutes now, and we need to move on to the next
Well, how come you don't put a time limit on all these other people that
I did have a
rambled on here? You know, I had the same situation with the Health and Human Services Committee. Somebody gets up there and they ramble on for the first hour and then a half hour, and then when it comes to other people that have something to say, they get 3 minutes, 1 minute left. Now I'm getting to the gist of the money plan, which is what's going to roll me into office, because other people understand the money plan,
Mr.
and they're
Davis,
tired
we can invite,
of taxes.
Mr. Davis, we can invite you to the committee hearing this evening, and then you can have a couple more minutes if you'd like to finish. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
That's the deal.
Okay.
I'll see you this evening.
Commissioner Schoweiler.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your testimony. And then on deck is John Housleyden. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I am Nancy Schoweiler, Dakota County Commissioner for District 4, which is comprised of portions of Egan, Inver Grove Heights, and Rosemount. I am also the legislative lead for the Dakota County Board of Commissioners and a member of the county's Transit Improvement Board. On behalf of the Dakota County Board, I appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts on House File 2395. Dakota County has consistently advocated for and supported an array of transportation funding increases to address important statewide and regional transportation needs that include deteriorating infrastructure, congestion, transit and multimodal alternatives, as well as job growth and economic development. Again, this year, increased transportation funding is a clear need for our state, and the Dakota County Board supports a comprehensive, balanced, and equitable transportation funding bill. However, we have serious concerns about the balance and equity of this bill. First, the bill unevenly addresses the needs of Metro Transit, Greater Minnesota Transit, and highways as identified in the Governor's Transportation Finance Advisory Committee report. Based on our analysis, the bill generates almost 1.5 times of the maximum funding gap identified for Metro Transit needs. The bill generates over 100% of needs identified for Greater Minnesota Transit, with no sales tax effort required of Greater Minnesota counties for transit funding. The bill generates only about 18% of statewide highway needs and 11% of total county highway needs. And revenue dedicated for metropolitan bike and pedestrian facilities is greater than the new revenue generated for county highways in the 7 metropolitan counties. Second, the bill does not adequately address the needs of suburban counties like Dakota, who will rely heavily on highway investment to meet our transportation needs. We are facing significant growth over the next 20 years, with 100,000 new residents anticipated in Dakota County, resulting in significant transportation challenges. These challenges include county highways that stand in for a very limited trunk highway system, the need for over 30 miles of new county highways to serve developing areas, and over 120 miles of county highways expected to be under capacity by 2030. Dakota County faces a shortfall of $25 million per year to meet our county highway needs. Even as our need for transit increases, the vast majority of new investments in Dakota County will be for highways, including those to support transit in Dakota County, which is likely to run on highways rather than rail. As proposed, House File 2395 is significant and comprehensive, but it is not balanced or equitable. It would reduce the amount of leased motor vehicle sales tax available to suburban counties, including Dakota, in 2016 and beyond from current law, which was utilized in 2008 to help address suburban county highway needs. As proposed, it provides no sales tax revenue for highways, which are vital to support our transit operations, and in total will add more than $60 million in new taxes from Dakota County, yet only about $3.5 million of new county highway funding is guaranteed back to Dakota County.
Commissioner, will you be able to wrap up your remarks?
Yes,
shortly?
I am. While we recognize the need to support the comprehensive statewide transportation network and regional transit, this bill, as currently drafted, needs some additional work to address Dakota County transportation needs and equity for Dakota County taxpayers. The Dakota County Board urges your support for amendments to the bill that are consistent with our adopted position, which includes dedication of the leased vehicle sales tax for transportation with at least 50% of the total proceeds directed to suburban counties for highway purposes, placing at least 1/4% of any new sales tax under the control of the individual metropolitan county boards for transportation purposes, including highways. Dakota County stepped forward and took a tough vote to join CTIB and help fund transit in the metro region. Yet only the 5 CTIB counties have not been granted the authority to collect a locally controlled sales tax. We further urge you to support an amendment to the bill which provides authority for the CTIB counties to enact a local option sales tax for transportation in the same manner as the 82 non-CTIB counties. Such an amendment would give Dakota County and other CTIB counties the same authority for locally controlled transportation funding that the 82 non-CTIB counties have.
Excuse me, Commissioner, we do have a question for our committee.
Sure.
I will take that from Representative Beard.
Madam Chair, thank you. And I know I want to thank Commissioner Showalter for her testimony and just for the committee's edification to point out 2 things. One is I'll be giving many of these comments again tomorrow when I offer the 812 amendment to the bill when we get around to amendments tomorrow morning, because it's important to note that not all counties in the metro area are created equal or have developed equally. Ms. Showalter, Commissioner Showalter, has made the point that transit in many of our counties actually depends on roads and bridges. And we are very fond of the transit system that we've been able to develop in Scott County in particular. I'm sure Dakota is as proud of theirs. In fact, Scott County Transit will be joining, I believe, shortly Minnesota Valley as we continue to economize and use the dollars more effectively. But members, the issue that she pointed out that I just wanted to underscore is transit in many areas of the metro area depends on roads and bridges. And the way the bill is constructed now, we are precluded from spending any of the new money on roads and bridges unless we do the gas tax. And that's why my amendment will address some of that tomorrow. Perhaps there's another amendment that could address the additional concerns that Commissioner Showalter's raised. But at the end of the day, unless we can cross a river on a bridge that isn't a bottleneck and have more bridges, which I'm very fond of, and bridges get built by people who can make a good living building bridges, because at the end of the day, bridges across rivers connect us, keep us accessible. And oh, by the way, did I mention that our bus service runs on bridges, and it depends on lane miles and bridges. I think I've made my point, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me comment on Ms. Showalter's testimony.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, may I conclude?
Could you do it in 20 seconds? And then you may.
Okay. We strongly encourage further work on this important transportation legislation to better provide balance and equity. We firmly believe that inclusion of our board-supported provisions can help address transportation needs across all modes and equitably serve transportation users in all areas of the state. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will stand for any further questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We have one more testifier that we're going to be able to get through today. We will what's that? Yeah, we're going to come. Oh, I shouldn't say today. I should say now. We're going to be coming back tonight at 7 o'clock, and we'll verify that time. And I would like to welcome Mr. Houseladen to our committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Houseladen. I'm president of the Minnesota Trucking Association. We represent over 680 motor carriers and their allied vendors across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on HF 2395. And like the members of this committee, the Minnesota trucking companies that I represent do care deeply about Minnesota's roads and bridges, and we have always paid our fair share, and we are willing to continue to do so. And I want to stress that as the payers, we are the ones who have to figure out what can be absorbed and what can be passed along. And so this means we do have strong opinions regarding the best way to collect those funds. Now, these opinions stem from our status as really just small businesses on wheels. You know, most trucking companies today still are family-owned. They have 20 trucks or fewer, and they drive across multiple jurisdictions. And with freight rates quoted by the cents per mile, trucking truly is a business of counting pennies. And most of these small businesses have margins of only 2 or 3%. I want to be clear that the Minnesota Trucking Association does support an increase in transportation funding, but through existing mechanisms. And to that end, we do support an increase in the state fuel tax, but we do oppose the creation of a gross receipts tax. We believe the fuel tax is the best mechanism because it is scalable. You can increase it to meet the need. It is predictable. The assessment can be known in advance, and it does not change. It is reciprocal. States can net out proceeds to each based on gallons purchased and miles driven in each state. It is transparent in that payers know the cost and where it is used. It is efficient. It collects all the money due, and then it spends little on administration, and finally it's accountable. Rates and those who set them are subject to the vote of the people. So we believe the gross receipts tax misses on at least 3 of these measures: predictable, reciprocal, and transparent, and that's why we oppose that measure. So we do look forward to working together on building a stronger transportation system for Minnesota. And again, if the conversation is about raising the fuel tax, I'm happy to come back and talk about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to verify the time that we will be reconvening at 7 and what room number in, oh, well, it's not there, but that's a 10 a.m. one. So, we do, everyone who is on, it's 6 p.m. in room 300 South. Now, the rest of the testifiers, is everybody able to come back this evening? It's 6 p.m., 300 South. Okay, we have one person saying they're not able to. If you could give us your brief testimony, we would like to take that. Representative Hausman?
We're just quickly, I don't know if you're aware, it sounds like both the Republican and Democratic caucuses are meeting at 5:45.
Okay, then we'll do 7? Okay. Yeah, we're going to make an executive decision here and say let's meet at 7 in room 300 South. Okay. Thank you for your patience, and I will let you say your name for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I'd have my kids with me here tonight if I had to. I appreciate you allowing me to speak. I am Steve Bott. I'm the chair of the I-94 Coalition, and I'm also the president of the City Engineers Association of Minnesota. And mostly, you've got a packet before you. I want to just thank you and advocate for continued program expansion and funding for the Corridors of Commerce and also the TED program. In representing 94, you were able to, a year ago when I first heard the words Corridors of Commerce, come up with a very feasible program and plan that was able to quantify return on investment. And for our coalition and for 94 and a lot of the other cities that are able to benefit from that program, those can quantify in the project that was a bite-sized piece for us. We're not done yet, but for that bite-sized piece, you're able to get, right on 94, 4,000 hours per year of relief for the citizens and businesses of Minnesota. That's a large number per year when you try to do the math. I'm an engineer, so I like to do the nerdy math. The other thing, 7,500 commercial vehicles a day travel that route. It's only growing. And this project and this program is a great one that is able to put numbers and return on investment to that. My last point on that would be businesses. As we heard from the Trucking Association, and one of our businesses along the corridor all the way in St. Cloud, Golden Pump, was able to quantify that they lose $250,000 every year on 94 due to the congestions and the problems. So expand that on the whole corridor, and it's very significant. So with that, I appreciate your time. I just wanted to summarize and thank you for the program, encourage its expansion, and continued success for that, for our coalition and a lot of the other important projects throughout Minnesota. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Representative Hausman.
Not a question to him, but I'm just struck by, we only, and maybe they left already, but we only had 2 other names, I think. Is there any way, because they've waited through all of this time? I mean, it sounds
We
as
have
though
additional names on the list as well.
other than those 2
Right, yes,
names that we had.
Right.
Just hate to think that if they're all brief, that we might.
Oh, we're stuck here, man. Why not them too?
Okay, I'm taking directions from our fearless leader, the chair, and what he'd like to do. So we are going to reconvene at 7 p.m. tonight in room 300 South. Right. And we're going to recess the committee. Thank you. We don't get it, right? Okay.